There's a moment in Season 1, Episode 4 of The Rings of Power that stopped me in my tracks. Disa stands before the mountain in Khazad Dûm, her voice rising in wordless song. Around her, a community of dwarves waits in reverent silence. Deep male voices drone Khuzdul harmonies, and then the mountain answers. Sediment on stone surfaces begins moving unnaturally, parting like water. The rocks rumble. Trapped miners emerge alive. I kept rewinding this scene, trying to understand why it felt so right despite being completely invented. Stone singing doesn't appear anywhere in Tolkien's canon, yet it feels authentically Middle-earth in a way that's hard to articulate. And I think that's because stone singing makes explicit something Tolkien left beautifully implicit, that dwarves aren't merely masters of stone through technical skill, but exist in profound reciprocal relationship with stone. What began as curiosity about a fictional practice led me down a rather unexpected path, through feminist ecological theory, indigenous epistemologies, cymatics, and ultimately to a question that extends far beyond one TV show. What does it mean for bodies and environments to be truly entangled? And what happens when that entanglement breaks? Let me describe what we actually see on screen. Stone singing, or resonating as the show sometimes calls it, functions like rudimentary sonar. Dwarves use vocal resonance to detect mineral veins, differentiate earth from ore from air from water, identify where it's safe to dig. Composer Bear McCreary worked directly with actress Sophia Nomvete, building the music around her live performances, creating what he describes as lament, pleading and power all woven together. But the show makes clear this isn't just practical technique, it's spiritual communion. Disa describes it as the mountain singing back, representing mutual respect between dwarves and stone. For 9 centuries, stone singers maintained Khazad Dûm's prosperity, guiding where to dig and, crucially, where to leave the mountain untouched. By Season 2, things change. Mount Doom erupts, collapsing Khazad Dûm's sun shafts. 3 stone singers attempt to find new paths for light, their harmonies designed to feel like piercing deeper into the rocks, like a musical X-ray. They sing the Khuzdul word Meshad, promise, making a vow to be respectful if granted knowledge. For the first time in 900 years, stone singing fails. The last sun shaft collapses. King Durin III declares the bond between them and the mountain is broken. And in Season 2, Episode 5, Disa ventures alone into darkness, singing to locate her daughter's lost tuning crystal. But this time, the mountain answers with a monstrous bellow from the depths. She's detected the Balrog, Durin's bane, sleeping below. Her warning is dismissed by King Durin III, whose ring of power lets him see through stone without respectful listening, claiming only riches lie below. The trajectory is devastating, from success to failure to correct detection that's ignored. This isn't about stone singing becoming inadequate. It's about the conditions that make stone singing possible being systematically destroyed. Now I need to address the elephant, or perhaps the Mumakil in the room. Stone singing doesn't exist in Tolkien's writings. Nowhere in The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, appendices, or letters does Tolkien describe dwarves singing to mountains. What he does give us is fragments. Dwarves are Gonhirim, masters of stone. They possess unrivaled craftsmanship. Alla the Smith created them from earth and stone during Middle-earth's darkness. Their culture remains largely mysterious, especially regarding dwarf women, who appear barely at all in canon. But here's what fascinates me. Stone singing feels Tolkien-esque precisely because it extends the logic of the Inulindale, that is Tolkien's creation myth, where the world is literally sung into being by the Ainur in collaborative symphony with Eru Ilúvatar. Music isn't metaphor in Tolkien, it's fundamental creative force. Scholar John Gardner argues music is the central symbol and the total myth of the Silmarillion. If the Ainur sang the world into existence, and Aule crafted dwarves from stone, then dwarves singing to stone participates in the original creative music that shaped their very substance. It's communion with the creator's domain through the same medium that brought both stone and dwarves into being. The practice echoes the Ainulindal in material, embodied form, not divine cosmogony but practical, daily subcreation. And this connects to Tolkien's concept of subcreation itself. In Mythopoeia and on fairy stories, he argues humans create because they're made imago Dei, in the creator's image. We make still by the law in which we're made. The showrunner's invention of stone singing operates as subcreation within Tolkien's secondary world, filling gaps he left largely unexplored. A question that is often asked when it comes to adaptations of Tolkien's world is, does this invention honor Tolkien's themes or corrupt them? I'd argue the former, because stone singing operationalizes a distinction absolutely central to Tolkien's environmental vision, the difference between respectful stewardship and violent extraction. To understand stone singing's deeper significance, I want to introduce two concepts from feminist ecological theory that I'll admit initially seemed rather abstract, until I thought with them through what's happening on screen. The first is Karen Barad's interaction. Barad rejects the premise that voice and stone exist as separate entities that then interact. Instead, she argues that objects emerge through particular interactions. They're mutually constituted in the encounter itself. Voice and stone don't pre-exist their entanglement in functional terms. Both are enacted through their relationship. Applied to stone singing, this means we shouldn't think of it as human voice acting upon passive geological matter. Rather, voice stone emerges as a singular assemblage. Neither controls the encounter. Both contribute agentic capacities that shape what emerges. The stone kicks back, its density, crystalline structure, and porosity constrain and enables certain vocal possibilities. Simultaneously, vibration activates stone's latent sonic capacities, what Jane Bennett would call its thing power. The second concept is Stacy Alaimo's transcorporeality, the idea that human bodies are fundamentally inseparable from the environments they inhabit. She writes about the time-space where human corporeality in all its material fleshiness is inseparable from nature or environment. Transcorporeality means recognizing that we're intermeshed with the dynamic material world, which crosses through them, transforms them, and is transformed by them. For stone singing, this means voice doesn't just travel through stone. Voice and stone form a transcorporeal continuum. The dwarf's vocal cords, breath, flesh, and bone form a continuous material assemblage with the mountain's crystalline structures, mineral composition, and acoustic properties. Breath becomes mineral, flesh resonates with stone, the body's interiority opens onto geological time. I realize this might sound abstract, but here's why it matters. It means stone singing isn't representing a relationship with geological matter. It's enacting and bringing into being the mutual agency of both parties. It's what we might call affective geology. Not abstract geological knowledge, but felt, vibrated, sung understanding that emerges through bodily practice. What surprised me in researching this was discovering how many real-world practices parallel stone singing. Inuit throat singing, katajak, practiced traditionally by women, imitates wind, water, and geological forces. The Inuit word nipi encompasses music, speech, animal calls, and natural forces without distinction. There's no separation between these sonic categories. Performers understand the practice as maintaining their ecosystem's spiritual health through embodied connection to landscape. Tuvan throat singing similarly imitates mountains, streams, and winds, reflecting herders' deep connection to their environment. Native American traditions include singing stones legends, stones that resonate with melody when touched. Australian Aboriginal women's totemic songs encode knowledge of edible seeds and ecological relationships, functioning simultaneously as spiritual practice, knowledge transmission, and assertion of land rights. The philosophical core across these traditions is reciprocity. Robin Wall Kimmerer, Potawatomi botanist and author of Braiding Sweetgrass, articulates indigenous relationality as viewing earth and stone as kin, not resources. Knowledge emerges from reciprocal relationships rather than unidirectional extraction. Singing to stone becomes a practice of reciprocity, giving voice, attention, and respect in exchange for knowledge and sustenance. And there's scientific grounding here too. Cymatics, the study of visible sound and vibration, demonstrates that voice is material force that literally shapes matter. Hans Jenny's experiments showed how different frequencies produce different patterns in sand and water. MIT research confirms materials vibrate measurably in response to sound. Voice doesn't just metaphorically affect stone, it transforms stone's vibrational state, organizing matter through frequency. Which brings us back to why stone singing's failure matters so much. The show isn't depicting the inadequacy of an ancient practice. It's showing the corruption of the conditions that make relationship possible. When the rings of power enter Khazad Dûm, they replace relational knowing with unilateral sight. King Durin III's ring allows him to perceive mineral veins without singing, without asking, without listening for which areas should remain untouched. The ring instantiates what Barad would call a different cut, a different apparatus that produces different phenomena. Stone singing produces stone as responsive kin. The ring produces stone as extractable resource. And here's where the gendered dimension becomes crucial. The ancient practice of stone singers, predominantly female dwarves who hold cultural authority through their communion with mountains, is rendered obsolete by King Durin's ring-enhanced vision. One could see this as masculine extraction superseding feminine relation, technological shortcut replacing embodied practice, individual power displacing communal ritual. When Disa's warning about the Balrog is dismissed, "You are mistaken, we witness whose knowledge counts as legitimate." The ring-bearer's extractive vision trumps the stone singer's embodied affective knowledge. Even though stone singing correctly detected catastrophic danger, this reflects real-world patterns where indigenous and feminine environmental knowledge is systematically devalued in favor of masculinist, colonial, technological approaches. The stone singers maintained Khazad-dûm successfully for 9 centuries through reciprocal relationship. Decades of ring-influenced mining will awaken the Balrog and destroy the kingdom. The tragedy isn't technological inevitability. It's ethical failure to maintain right relationship with Earth. Existing Tolkien eco-criticism establishes that environmental themes are central to Middle-earth. Tolkien witnessed his beloved Warwickshire countryside destroyed by Birmingham's industrial growth, writing, "The country in which I lived in childhood was being shabbily destroyed before I was 10. His fiction consistently contrasts extractive industrialism, Isengard's mind of metal and wheels, Mordor's desolation, the scouring of the Shire, with proper stewardship. Matthew Dickerson and Jonathan Evans identify Gandalfian stewardship, nurturing land rather than exploiting it, as Tolkien's ecological ideal. Saruman embodies extraction and violation. Treebeard represents relationship and care. Stone singing operationalizes distinction at the level of practice. It shows what stewardship looks like in Dwarven culture, not just technical mastery but communion, respect, and the humility to leave certain areas untouched. The rings of power, even those given to dwarves, embody Tolkien's critique of anthropocentric mastery over nature. They promise control, efficiency, wealth, but at the cost of reciprocity, humility, and attunement. The corruption they cause in dwarves isn't supernatural transformation. Tolkien notes dwarves proved resistant to domination. It's corruption of practice, the replacement of good relationship with exploitative extraction. So what does all this mean for understanding Arda's entangled bodies and environments? This seminar's theme. Stone singing offers a productive site for exploring how adaptations can make explicit what remains implicit in Tolkien's texts. The practice embodies transcorporeality, the fundamental inseparability of bodies and worlds. Dwarven bodies aren't separate from stone. They're made from stone by Ole. They dwell within stone in Khazad-dûm. And through stone singing they maintain continuity with stone via sonic vibration. The boundary between flesh and rock becomes permeable, provisional, enacted in some moments when we distinguish singer from mountain, dissolved in others when voice and stone form singular resonant assemblage. This has implications for reading embodiment throughout Tolkien. Hobbits and the Shire co-create each other. Elves and forests interact. Lothlorien's malorn trees reflect and produce elvish sensibilities, while elvish singing and dwelling shape the forest's flourishing. Ents are trees, the ultimate collapse of organism-environment distinction. Stone singing also invites us to consider sonic dimensions of Arda's environmental entanglements more seriously. If the world was sung into being in the Ainulindale, what does it mean that sound and music pervade every culture's relationship with place? Might we read Tom Bombadil's Songs of Power, Luthien's Sleep Song, or Elvish hymns to Elbereth as practices of transcorporeal interaction similar to stone singing? And the feminist frameworks help us recognize that care work and maintenance work are forms of power, not weakness. Stone singers aren't warriors or craftspeople, the traditionally valorized masculine roles. They're caregivers who maintain relationship, who listen for what the mountain needs, who warn against violation. The show makes their practice sacred, beautiful, and essential until masculine extraction supersedes it with catastrophic results. I started this inquiry simply curious about an invented practice in a TV adaptation. But stone singing has turned out to be a remarkably rich site for thinking about questions that extend far beyond Middle-earth. What does it mean to be in reciprocal relationship with the more-than-human world? How do we distinguish knowledge practices that honor and maintain versus those that extract and destroy? What forms of expertise get valued and whose warnings get dismissed? How do bodies and environments mutually constitute each other rather than existing in separation? Stone singing doesn't appear in Tolkien's canon, but as a sub-creative invention, it succeeds because it remains faithful to deeper patterns. The power of music, the maker's relationship with materials, the dangers of exploitation, the value of stewardship. By reading it through feminist ecological theory, recognizing stone's agency, voices materiality, and the trans-corporeal entanglement of dwarven bodies with geological environments, we can see how the practice enriches rather than contradicts Tolkien's vision. Arda becomes visible as a world where bodies and environments are never truly separate, only differently entangled. And perhaps that's what makes Disa's stone singing resonate so deeply. Not because it's fantastical, but because it's a practice we desperately need. A model for how we might listen to what the earth is telling us, how we might maintain relationships rather than just extract resources, how we might recognize the agency of the more-than-human world before it's too late. The mountain sings back. The question is whether we're still listening. Thank you.